It's the perfect example of what we call contextualism in architecture. Let me explain this to you. Contextualism means that it mirrors its environment. Now look at the river curves right here, and so does the building for 365 feet. Now look at the glass. It's concave and convex. So as you go by it, it looks like ripples of water, doesn't it? It's the same color as the river, and it even reflects the buildings across the way. Now look at the whole thing. It looks like a river of a building, doesn't it? It's a spectacular design. But you might also remember it as Ferris's dad's building from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of the many movies filmed here in Chicago, along with, The Untouchables, The Fugitive, Adventures in Babysitting, and the Citizen Kane of Chicago movies, of course, the Blues Brothers. Speaking of movies and projections, take a look on the Riverwalk level right here. You're going to see a big gray box. See that gray box? Every night from 15 minutes after sundown for 2 hours, that projects art onto the face of the merchandise mart. That entire building becomes a canvas for the work of 4 artists. It's absolutely spectacular. It's called Art on the Mart. Every night, all summer, 15 minutes after the sun goes down for 2 hours. Come on down to the Riverwalk and look at it. The Riverwalk's lit up at night, and it's safe-ish. No, we have security down there. What can I say? It's a big city. I don't want to make any promises. Tons of people that are down here every night watching it. Except tonight, probably, because everyone's going to be out there watching the fireworks. The L. Our subway. There it goes. It's pretty noisy. Luckily, we've color-coded them for our guests that are visiting from around the world, because before they used to have very crazy names. Even we didn't understand what train we were supposed to take. Now it's the brown line, the red line, the green line. Pretty easy. Want to hear a sad story? I don't want to tell it to you, but I feel like I should sort of point it out. This is the site of one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Happened right here in 1915. It was called the Eastland disaster. I don't think I should tell you the story. It's about a bunch of people on a boat having a good time, and the boat capsizes and everybody dies. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that. I don't want to harsh anybody's mellow. It's a holiday weekend, all right? If you want to know about it, it's called the Eastland disaster, 1915. Google it. In the meantime, we're going to move on here. There's our Campanile building again. But what I want you to do is when we get past this next bridge, I want you to look way up into the sky to the right in front of the boat. Way off in front of the boat until you locate a building that looks like it has a gold spire on top of it. Right up there. You see it up there? That big gold spire? Well, that's real gold, ladies and gentlemen. That's not paint. That's the Carbide and Carbon building from 1928. There is beautiful green granite going up to meet that gold inlay. Do you know that entire building was inspired by a bottle of champagne? Festivities begin. Building coming up on your right. By the way, if you're a little jealous of that, we do have a bar downstairs. You do know that, right? So this is the 35 West Wacker, home to the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. You might remember this building. About 20 years ago, there was a daredevil by the name of Nick Wallenda. He stretched a high wire from the top of that building to the top of the Corncob Towers here, and he walked across the river twice, blindfolded. So we got the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial coming up here on your right on the Riverwalk level, okay? But look up from it then. Pay our respects to our veterans from that conflict. And then look at that gorgeous building behind it. That's the Jewelers Building from 1927. Way up in that dome on the top. That was where Al Capone used to have a speakeasy during Prohibition. And then it actually turned into a nightclub in the 1930s, but by then Al Capone was in jail. And you know the other cool thing about that building is that the jewelers who worked in there from 1929 to 1941 were able to drive their car into the building onto an elevator. The elevator would take the car and the jewelers up to their floor, and they could park right next to where they worked. How's that for a morning commute, huh? Skinniest skyscraper in the city, right there, Mather Tower from 1929. And then here we are, back at the site of the original Fort Dearborn. So this means that everything that we're going to be passing beyond this is residue or debris from the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. There's a great rooftop bar up there right now, as a matter of fact, on the London House. One of the best rooftop bars in the city, if you ask me. But let's go back to that fire for a minute. Everybody always blames that fire on Mrs. O'Leary and her cow, Daisy. Have you heard that story? They said that she went out that evening to milk her cow. The cow got rambunctious, kicked over her lantern, and started her barn on fire. Well, we know that none of this is true. For one thing, they never milk their cows at night. Number two, cows don't kick backwards. Number three, Mrs. O'Leary's barn didn't burn down. And perhaps the most compelling argument, a journalist on his deathbed admitted to making the story up to sell newspapers. But in any case, we did have it was a pretty devastating fire. It burned for 3 days. It burned 4.5 miles of the city, and we pushed all that debris out here and made our city bigger. And did you notice these buildings are also about 45 feet up in the ground, up in the air? And that's because there's a whole sub-city below here of parking lots and delivery routes and train stations. That's where all the traffic is that you don't see up on top. It's all underground. Mies van der Rohe did design that building. As a matter of fact, his offices were in there.